Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Minecraft. It's been a while since I made a YouTube video, and you'll see today that I'm not going to be playing in the world that I have played on, which is this YouTube world, that series. I'm actually going to be playing on this world, which you guys haven't seen. It's called Nostalgia. And the reason why I'm going to be playing on this world today is because I'm actually making this video as a final project for one of my classes in school. It's a class on the second half of the New Testament. It's a religion class, and I've certainly learned a lot in this class. And my subject for the video that I want to talk about as this final project is the role of women and what Paul, the writer of many of the epistles or letters in the New Testament, thinks about women, what he writes about women, and his perspective on the role of women. And so, the first thing that I'm going to do here, because a lot of Paul's writings about women in the New Testament come in the book of Corinthians. And so I thought it would be kind of interesting to build a Greek um, those Greek pillar buildings that they would build, and a lot of them are crumbling. Like the Acropolis is the most famous one. Um, we're gonna build one of those. It might be large, it might be small, depending on how much wool and resources and time I have. It might be quite large. It might be complete or it might be crumbling. If I'm running out of time, I feel like the video is coming to an end. I might just make it a crumbling, quarter finished little pillar building there. But as you can see, this is my personal world. This isn't the world I usually play on. And so I have this football field here, which I actually think will be perfect for gathering a little bit more wool as we begin to talk about women in the New Testament. So this class focused on the second half of the New Testament specifically. And the reason I bring that up is because in the first half of the New Testament, specifically in the Gospels, women play a major, major role in um, in the Gospels and in the ministry of the Savior. So women, for example, are some of the first witnesses of the resurrected Christ, which is very weird and interesting for ancient ancient society, ancient humans. Um, they did not believe that women were reliable witnesses. They did not believe that women were basically able to be trusted in these types of matters. And so it looks like it's raining right now in the game. I'll probably get started with what will I have because, oh, it looks like mobs do spawn though in the rain. For some reason, I thought the light level would be affected. But you can see this football field is ideal for just spawning tons of sheep. Um, Anyway, as I was saying, the ancient world did not believe the witness of women to be reliable, and so it was actually very interesting that women are among the first and the most important witnesses of the resurrected Savior. That shows that, in my opinion, Jesus himself had a very, very high opinion of women. Um, but Christianity, especially early Christianity, especially Paul, has some associated controversy because he has said some things about women that in our modern culture that we do not necessarily agree with or understand. And the main one that I want to talk about at the beginning is that women should keep their head covered, their hair covered, especially, he says, while praying and while prophesying in church. And that's kind of like, I mean, it's not necessarily like offensive to say that in as much, or I mean it might be offensive to some people to say that, but like the main thing that just strikes me about that is it's just weird, right? Like I don't think anything of a woman covering or not covering her hair. And so that's like the first sign to me that this is something, that's from kind of a very different, very foreign culture to the one I share. By the way, look at this football stadium. I just think that looks pretty cool. I'm not quite done with it. I still need to build this fourth side over here, and I want to actually connect that concourse all the way around, but it has taken me quite a bit of time. I usually just do it while watching a show or whatever, just kind of mindless work. Mindless entertainment. I wonder if I should build it on the ice. I feel like that would be kind of cool. So, the design I was thinking for this, I looked up a picture of Corinth, because this is in the epistle to the Corinthians. And they have this huge pillar building, like I was saying, and it's 5 by 3. So there are 5 pillars lengthwise and then 3 pillars widthwise. And depending on how much wool it actually takes to complete the project, it might be finished, it might be unfinished. In real life, it's about like half of them have fallen down, I think. So, anyway, like I was saying, so Paul says women should cover their heads while praying, they should cover their head while prophesying. And immediately that's kind of interesting because, like, some people, I think, walk away from the New Testament, from reading the New Testament, or not really even reading the New Testament, more like reading social media posts about the New Testament, and think that Paul wanted women to not participate in church services. And to me, the fact that he's asking them to cover their heads while praying and while prophesying, the fact that he's doing that kind of, in my opinion, is a refutation of that a little bit. That Paul is actually expecting women to participate in church services, to speak, and in a way to teach, right? Praying and prophesying. I mean, if you're prophesying about something, like, I feel like that's teaching about something, really. You know, you're teaching about something that is going to occur in the future. It looks like I'm almost already out of wool, so who knows how many of these pillars I'll really be able to knock out. I don't know the dimensions of this. I kind of was thinking doing something along these lines where, you know, if you look at these Greek pillars, they kind of stick out at the end. That's a mistake right there. So what I'm going to try to do, I made a mistake. I don't have a bucket. So what I'm going to do is fall off and fall back on. Okay, there we go. Oh, perfect, because that's a mistake as well. And then I should be able to just work my way down this surface. So anyway, Paul does expect women to be able to participate in church. He expects them to receive prophecies. He expects them to be able to pray, to stand in front of the group and speak. There is a part later in the Epistle to the Corinthians where he advises women. He says, keep silent in the churches. However, the fact that he's, like I just said, the fact that he's asking them to keep their head covered while praying and prophesying shows that he didn't actually mean that they could not participate at all. Now, the part of the thing about Paul's epistles that make it hard to understand is we don't know why he's writing them, or rather, we don't have like a record of the circumstances or events that caused him to think that an epistle was necessary or useful here. What we do have is Paul's writing, right? So we don't know why he's writing, we don't know who he's responding to, but we do have his writing. So some scholars have thought that it might have been the result of a power struggle in the church. There was a woman in Corinth who was kind of de facto leading the church because it was in her house. They would meet in a house. They didn't really have a building. I mean, this is very early in time. And actually, you know, I'm killing cows right now for their leather. And speaking of leather, Paul was a leather worker. He actually always supported himself, except for in one circumstance where he actually needed a congregation to help him. But in every other circumstance, he supported himself on his missions by being a leather worker and setting up his tent in the middle of the city, and people would bring him shoes or their own tents or whatever, you know, whatever they needed to be repaired, and he would repair it. And that gave him the opportunity, as you can imagine, to talk to a lot of people about Jesus Christ. Look at that pillar over there. That looks pretty cool. That actually looks quite sizable. I mean, you get 5 that way and 3 that way. I mean, that could look like a really cool crumbling Greek monument. Let's see, I have some more, a little bit more wool. And I've got more wool in here. But anyway, the word that Paul uses is actually really interesting. So let me read it to you. In 1 Corinthians 11:5, he said, "Every woman that prayeth or prophesieth with her head uncovered dishonoreth her head." And the fact that he said that it dishonored that woman, that it dishonored, especially because, to Paul, her head, the head of the woman, is her husband, right? So he's saying this dishonors not only you, but your husband, your family. Um, and, when I think of that, I kind of think of like Mulan, like you'll bring honor to us all. Because in our modern culture, I'm going to do these 5 apart. Like, the idea of shame and honor is a little bit foreign to us. And one thing that I've spent a lot of time learning about this semester, especially reading the Iliad, reading the Odyssey, reading um, on the nature of the universe, um, some just famous Greek and Roman classical texts, is that shame and honor are like very, very, very important to the ancient world. Like, that is how society keeps itself together. I mean, if you imagine, right, our modern society, like, in some way is kept together with technology. And what I mean by that is, like, there are people that probably would rob a store if they could, but because they know that security cameras can see them and police can chase them down in cop cars, they decide not to rob the store, right? The incentives, we've been able to design a society where the incentive structure keeps people doing the right thing for the most part, right? Sometimes that incentive structure breaks down, right? If you don't have the right incentives, you might actually end up incentivizing crime and repeat crime. If someone commits a crime and then gets rewarded for it, they're going to commit another crime, or at very least doesn't get punished. Um, so we've kind of designed a system that kind of, it's not that it doesn't require societal trust to function, because it definitely does. But what it does do is it doesn't require a system of shame and honor to keep the lights on, right? Um, because, we have, for example, workers in the power plants that they are working for cash, right? They're working for cash, they're working to pay their rent or their mortgage, and that is why they show up to work. And it's not because it's inherently necessarily their responsibility, it's just because that's what their job is, right? Um, And the ancient world was very, very, very different than that. They didn't have that same incentive structure, which created a massive agency problem in almost everything you can think of relating to the ancient world. How do you know that the guy that you just met isn't going to just stab you and take all your gold and kidnap your wife and run off to somewhere? Because how is he ever going to get caught if he does? And so this system of honor and shame was very, very, very important. Basically, honor was, the way that ancient Greek people conceived of honor was following your role in society, right? And if everyone just follows their role, if everyone just does what they're supposed to do, society keeps rolling, right? All of a sudden you can trust your neighbor because you know that they are trying to fulfill their role in society. And so you can kind of imagine, like, the ancient Greek world, you have at the top of the food chain. By the way, these pillars look pretty cool, yeah? I did do a design of them in creative mode before doing this build just to see how they would look, and I think they look pretty good. I'm trying to kind of capture the effect of the uh, well, now I'm forgetting the word. Oh, the pillar narrowing towards the top, but then having that little piece that kind of inverts to. Um, I'm pretty sure it's just design to look like it's structurally carrying the weight, but maybe it is actually carrying something. But they'll do like flower designs on that where the pillar juts out at the top. Anyway, not an architecture major. So you can kind of imagine in this ancient Greek mindset, in the ancient Greek world, in Corinth, which Paul is talking to, like the greatest shame is dishonoring the gods because the gods are at the top of the food chain, right? It goes gods and then other cosmic forces, right? Like the Greeks didn't really focus too much on like Titans, for example. Like they're kind of more niche in the Greek mythological worldview of gods and monsters, but like if you think about these other cosmic forces that humans, basically you have to bow down to, um, all sorts of things, all sorts of primeval forces and mystical forces and magical people. Like those are the next step down from the gods. And below that are men, right? And within men, you have rankings of, great men like kings and heroes and warriors. And then you have normal men. And then below men, you have women. That's just how they saw it back then. Um, that men were more important than women, or not necessarily of importance, but of status, right? Like, um, men were seen as higher status in Greek society than women. And, in fact, some Greek philosophers thought that women were actually just like deformed or like disabled men that, like, in the womb, if something went wrong, then it would come out as a woman instead of a man. And obviously, we now know that it's just a 50-50 shot, right? Thanks to science. Um, but that's just such a strange and bizarre way of thinking. But that's just the reality of the ancient world, right? It's like you can't really do anything to change it. It's just the truth of how they thought. Um, so anyway, you have this system of honor and shame. And as long as you play your part, society works, crops grow, the gods are pleased. I'll give you a big example of this. So we talked about ancient Greek people believing in their gods, right? But it's kind of a little bit different than the way that than Christians believe in Jesus Christ, or Muslims believe in God. They call God Allah, um, because in each of these Abrahamic religions and in most modern religions across the board, believing in God means that you kind of trust that God. You align yourself with that God. You worship that God because you have a relationship, right? Because you feel like you are accepted by that God. And for ancient Greek people, as best as I can understand it, they saw the gods far more transactionally. um, they didn't necessarily see themselves like as the equivalent of the Abrahamic covenant, right? So like God says to Abraham, your seed will be blessed, you'll have these endless blessings, blah blah blah, and in return, Abraham worships God, he loves God, it's counted to him for righteousness, right? There's this agreement, this relationship between Abraham and God. And as far as I know, like most polytheistic people, including the Greeks, did not have that view of their gods. Rather, And although there were gods that they would, sometimes specifically single out for or worship, especially if they were priests of a particular god. But rather, they almost kind of viewed these gods as cosmic forces, right? So, like, think of sailors, right? Sailors are going to worship to Poseidon. And are they going to worship to Poseidon because they love Poseidon? Because they're offering their undying loyalty and devotion to Poseidon? Uh, no, not really. They're worshiping, or they're offering a sacrifice. They're burning the lamb for Poseidon because they just want him to control the weather for them so that they can cross the sea safely. Like, it's kind of like, I do this, you do this, right? Like, um, if I burn this lamb, then Zeus will help me in battle, and maybe we can beat the other guy, right? You see this in the Iliad, right? And so the interesting thing about polytheistic people is that, like, a lot of times anciently, like, they had no problem with adopting new gods, even if those gods, like, kind of took the place of their other ones. Like, if you find out some other god of the sea, right, and you regularly worship or sacrifice to Poseidon, like, you see no problem with just sacrificing to that god as well, because it's just like a cause and effect. You buy something at the vending machine, and that pops out, right? You push the right buttons, and a result becomes manifest. Um, so, like, that was why it was really, really, really important to, like, honor the gods most of all. Like, you honor the gods because they can make your life great, or they can make your life horrible, and they don't really care about you as a human, right? Um, they don't really care if you do well or poorly, or, we see in the Iliad, the gods basically treat human warfare where men are dying as, like, we would watch a game of football, where it's kind of like you're just an observer, and you're like, oh, I just want it to be a good game. And, sometimes you cheer for one side or you cheer for the other side, but, like, the gods are, like, very disconnected from the brutality that they bring upon mankind. So it's like, you really, really, really want them on your side. You don't want to bring any shame on your head, bringing it back to this idea of honor and shame. And one of the things that was shameful in Greek society was for married women specifically to have their hair uncovered. So, like, for example, if you were an unmarried woman, you could have your hair uncovered, and nobody would really blink an eye, even though your hair was considered, it was considered an important and intimate part of yourself, but it wasn't considered, you know, something that was inappropriate to be shown at all in public if you weren't married, right? Like, it was fine for women to walk around with their hair out, but it was a sign, potentially in a lot of circumstances, that you were a young single woman. And, like, what was custom in most, I wouldn't say most, I don't know enough, about enough different ancient civilizations to say most, but in many ancient civilizations, not just the Greeks, was that married women were expected to keep their hair covered. Okay, let's see how these pillars work. So once you become married, you keep your hair covered. Beforehand, you can wear it out. Yeah, though, it's pretty good, I think. So I'm running a little bit low on wool. Let's see what these sheep have. Let's grab some wool from these, and then let's connect probably across the top here, and then let's build some ruined pillars below. Um. Anyway, as I was saying, um, so for a married woman to take off her head covering in church would be considered, not only immodest, right, but also potentially, suggestive, right? Like, it's almost like wearing a wedding ring, right? Like, if if your wife is always taking off her wedding ring, some people, even if she's just doing it because her fingers are swollen or whatever, some people might think that it's because she doesn't want to appear as though she's married, right? Like some people just might think that. So it's not necessarily like always modest to, although in our culture it's not really one for one because people don't really care as much, at least in my opinion. Like you wear your wedding ring, you don't wear your wedding ring, like does it really matter? But in this context, like this mattered a lot because it was kind of signaling to other people like, hey, I'm available. Or if you're married, it's kind of signaling, I am dissatisfied in my marriage and I'm looking for a new husband. I'm treating myself as if I were a single woman. And so what Paul is saying is that, and I guess for a second, let's talk about why the women might have been doing this. Um, at the time, you know, at the time of the New Testament, many of these people that are being taught the gospel and learning about Jesus Christ, many of them, if not most of them, believed that Jesus Christ's second coming would happen very, very soon. And so a lot of societal relationships that like at one point were considered normal are beginning to break down. For example, um, people are refusing to work, right? Christians are refusing to work, and they're just having other people in their congregation. They're just asking them, "Hey, will you support me because I don't want to work anymore." And why didn't they want to work anymore? It wasn't just because they were lazy. It was because they thought the second coming was right away. It was right going to happen immediately. And that meant that it was pointless, right? It was pointless to work. And so I wonder if something similar was happening here, where the women were like, you know what? I don't want to wear my head covering, and besides, Jesus is going to come anyway. I don't think Jesus cares if I wear my head covering or not. This is a cultural thing, and so I don't feel like I should have to wear my head covering. And you know what? Like, from that perspective, like, I guess that's kind of fair. You think that's kind of fair. Um, but what Paul is saying is that doing that, acting immodestly, brings dishonor. It brings dishonor on yourself. And the reason why that's important, if you read about Paul's idea of Christian liberty, right? Which is the idea that not everything for Christians is because of a commandment, right? Not everything that we do is because God has a specific rule or specific mandate that we must do something. In fact, in a lot of situations, we actually have the freedom, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, to decide for ourselves, like what we do and don't want to do. But what we should do with that is not something that causes someone else to be uncomfortable or to lose their testimony or to think we're acting sinfully, right? And so this, I think, is one of those situations where women, if they're wearing their hair in such a manner and it causes other people to, you know, feel like the women in the church are being very disrespectful and that they don't feel welcome, or an outsider comes in and says Christians are some sort of weird sex cult because all their married women are walking around without covering their heads with veils. Like, he's just saying, like, be mindful of this. And so he asks the women, please do not pray or prophesy. Please do not pray or prophesy with your head uncovered, because this brings shame on your family. And, likewise to the men, right? He says, do not pray with your head covered, right? The opposite thing. Because if you're doing that, you're acting like a woman in your society, right? You're fulfilling the role of a woman. And like ultimately, that's what honor and shame is about. Is like, if you're a peasant, you don't act like the king, right? If you're a king, you don't act like the peasant. If you are a man, you don't act like a woman. If you're a woman, you don't act like a man. If you're immortal, don't act like a god, right? Don't offend the gods. If you're, you gotta know your place and you gotta stick to your place. So, in my opinion, although I do understand how these verses seem strange, I think once you understand the context of them and really the system of honor and shame which existed in the ancient world, you can see that, like, something like this probably did not constitute Paul's main opinion of women. Like, it's kind of funny because I asked AI before making this video, like, what did Paul think about women? After taking this class, by the way, after um, attending many of these lectures and having a really solid idea of what the New Testament speaks about women and knowing that almost all of it is positive, Paul says, no, neither is the man without the woman, neither is the woman without the man in the Lord. Like, in Jesus Christ, when we're talking about, his gospel, his kingdom, it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. God loves you. God wants to make covenants with you, right? That you have an eternal gender, but that doesn't affect the way that God feels about you. Um, that doesn't affect whether He's atoned for you or not. Um, which would, be pretty shocking, I think, to an ancient people that believed that women were defective. Um, but anyway, I asked AI, knowing, you know, the material in this course, and I asked AI. I said, "What did Paul think about women?" And the AI that I asked immediately started, giving these verses like, well, he believed that they should keep silence in the churches, and he believed that they should cover their heads while praying or prophesying. Once again, those things seem to be in contradiction, but oh well. And like, my point is just that, when you understand the system of honor and shame and what he's actually saying here, I don't think that, like, we have so few Pauline writings that it makes sense to include them, but, like, I don't think that these are reflective of his main views of women overall. So I guess my main point would be now, like, what did Paul think about women? And I would argue that his opinion on women was probably similar to the Savior's opinion on women, which was that women are amazing. Um, I personally, like, I have a wife. We're very different from each other, and yet she is really amazing to me in a lot of ways. Um, it's like, it's really not to get sappy or anything, but it's really strange to see the differences in men and women in my own personal life, like living with a woman and seeing every day, like, how different we are on so many things, and yet seeing, how beautiful that is, how beautiful life is, that men and women are not the same, and that that's okay, and that, it's just it's just a wonderful, wonderful thing. So anyway, I'm about out of wool, and I did build some pillars. Typically, you would have something running across the top here, and that's probably what I'll do. I don't know if I'll ever return to this world specifically again. Um, this is not at my spawn point, but I'm deciding to make this my home base. But if you guys want to see, if you guys want to see occasional updates about what's going on in this world, let me know, and I'd be more than happy to show off my builds and what I have going on. I just you know, I'm also going to start making videos on the YouTube world again, and don't necessarily want to have two different series going. But yeah, I'd be more than happy to provide the occasional update. I used to have a lot more wool, but I'll actually show you what happened to it. I used it all, every last every last block of it across this river here. I used it building a castle that overlooks a wheat field, which actually I'm now remembering that wheat field is yet unfinished, giving me three now major projects that I have not finished in this world, which honestly I think is fine. I mean, I I've not been playing as much as I have before, as I have sometimes. But honestly, I think it's okay to have, two or three major projects going on that you can log in and work on a little bit. Um, the thing is, I never want my Minecraft world to be like an obligation or feel stressful, like that just would defeat the entire point of it. So you can see here, that's a clock tower. I'm pretty proud of that. It didn't really look correct until the very end. And then there's two other parts of it. But you can see here that there's all these fence posts, like a ridiculous amount, a ridiculous number of fence posts that you like never need this many fence posts. And it's because I'm trying to make an indestructible wheat field, which is actually what I started on my YouTube World Series, if you guys remember. That I'm making an indestructible wheat field on there, and you can kind of see how it's turning out. Like I can jump on this. It was just raining, that's why there's these more fertilized areas. But like the seeds do not come out even when you jump on it because of that fence post taking up another half a block of the space underneath. It's technically a glitch, but that's a nice thing about playing on beta is that this glitch will last forever and ever and ever. They're not gonna reverse it in an update, right? Like I can make a huge invincible wheat field and it'll never ever go to waste, But anyway, where all my wool went, which is why I've had to collect some more wool in my football field. But anyway, I hope you guys liked this video. I just want to close with a brief testimony. I am a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. If you guys have watched my videos, I've mentioned that before. And I just want to testify of the love that our Savior has for each and every one of us. I do believe in God. I do believe in Jesus Christ. I believe that He's His Son. And not to interrupt my own testimony, but just look at that football stadium. That looks amazing. Anyway, I do believe in Jesus Christ, and I believe in a plan that God has for all of us. And I believe that part of His plan is that women and men are supposed to be together, right? At the beginning of Genesis, God creates Adam and sends down Adam's spirit into his body, and then has to ask, is it good that man should be alone, right? And like the answer is no, it's not good. And so I think that it's really important, like, that humans are able to find forever and ever that they can connect with the other gender and get married and start families. And this is part of like what will make you happy in life. And so I just bear my testimony that, like, regardless of gender discourse today, right? Like, I mean, I've seen a lot of women post, "Oh, men suck," kill all men, blah blah blah. Men are the worst. And I see guys on on the other side of that, post things about women too, right? Like sexist things about women, oh, women are the cause of all the problems of society today and blah blah blah. And it's like, as much as algorithms want to tear us apart and put us at each other's throats, like, I believe that the plan of God is for men and women to be together, right? Like, I just think that that is the right thing to do. I am different than my wife. I balance her out, and she balances me out in many other ways. And like, I just think that that is God's plan, is to send us to this earth in part to get married, in part to have kids, and to make these relationships between men and women. So I guess that's my testimony. I testify of the eternal family and the eternal worth of women. Because this has been a subject of the video as well, I just want to testify that Jesus Christ views women very highly, right? Like, they are the daughters of God. You always have to treat them with respect, And so, anyway, if you guys have any questions for me about what I believe, or any questions about the New Testament, what I've learned this semester, let me know in the comment down below. I try to respond to my comments, and I know that some people have commented asking when I'm coming back to the channel. I think I'll do a few videos this winter break, actually. I'll probably do at least 4 or 5. That's at least what I'm hoping for. So anyway, give this video a like if you liked it, subscribe if you haven't, And thank you guys for watching my religion final project. And I'll see you guys in some other video.